Before we get into this, understand that there won't be any discussion of this in the comments, because YouTube has changed their policy. They no longer do email notifications. It used to be that if you reply to something I said in the comments of some video, I would get a notification. Anonymous troll number 693 has replied to your comment on some video from a couple of years ago. And then I would go, read it, address it appropriately. I used to get several dozen notifications like that every day. But not just for recent videos either, but for old ones too. I mean, like my whole repertoire. So I mean, there'd be several dozen messages, and it wasn't just for the last one. It was really hard to keep up on. But I haven't gotten one such notification since June 17th. So if you post a reply to something I said, the only way I would ever know about it is if I scrolled through all the comments of all my videos every day.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I recently posted something on Facebook talking about biological, hormonal, developmental, and chromosomal conformations of intersex or transgender conditions. This is not a subject I ever talk about because I don't know much about it myself. I'm about as binary as they come. So I have no personal investment in this topic and no special knowledge to contribute to it. That's why I never made a video about this before, and I don't expect to make another one after this either. It's not my subject. But almost every day, some idiot on the interweb says, atheists don't know what a woman is. When in fact, those trolls can't come up with a single consistent definition themselves, not one that applies in all cases. They act as if you're not even human if you don't produce gametes. Some thoughtful comments explained a number of different types of notable exceptional circumstances, but to no avail. So far as I can see, the science seems to soundly support the trans community, but anti-trans haters can only talk about generalities. These bigots may acknowledge that exceptions exist, but they simply refuse to account for them, insisting that everyone everywhere is and always was either male or female, period, and that can never be changed, or that it should never be changed, even if it can be, because it doesn't matter to them whether that technology exists. The anti-trans bigots insist that it must not be used because of their own religious delusions or other petty prejudice being imposed against other people. At best, one of them in that thread said that everyone was male or female or intersex, implying that intersex people could not be accepted as male or female, but that they should be isolated as oddities. Now, some people are okay with being either or, neither nor, but not everyone. Most people, I think, would rather fit in where they feel they belong. Being denied that would not be a good circumstance for such a social species as we. So if they have their way, then you can't have yours. They want to restrict your right to even to your very identity, just so that they can enjoy their right not to even consider you. One particular person on that thread argued that trans people have a subjective identity. But isn't everyone's identity subjective by definition? It's even malleable, too. Some folks have a very different personality, attitude, and outlook in their youth than in their old age. The point behind my post in Facebook was that while I think trans people probably can provide objectively verifiable biological justifications for their condition, I don't think they necessarily have to, because the country I grew up in promised that everyone had freedom of expression tied to their constitutional right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. In fact, that is, or rather was, the greatest thing about America. If you want to make America great again, give us the nation we had a year ago, or better yet, the nation we had 10 years ago, when we had more rights than we do now. I don't know why people think that only atheists support the rights of trans people. There are plenty of Christians who do too, and there are prominent atheists who do not. The only correlation is that atheists, more often than not, tend to be supportive of human rights across the board, and not just for some demographics. But there are many people, including some atheists, who prefer to trivialize, demonize, or criminalize what they call the alphabet people, and what I call genderqueer or queer folk, which I consider to be inclusive of the whole non-binary spectrum. I don't mean it pejoratively. When I dipped my toe into Texas politics back in 2016, I ran against a Christian conservative incumbent, religious right Republican Robert Lee Hall, whose primary platform policy was making sure that trans people couldn't pee in public restrooms. I mean, he was also against teaching children anything factually accurate in school, whether in science, sex, or social studies, and he wanted to minimize or eliminate the interests and influence of dark-skinned people and deregulate everything so that rich people won't be accountable for anything they do to the environment, the economy, and their overworked but underpaid employees. But Texas Senator Bob Hall's number one priority was to further marginalize what is already the most marginalized demographic in this country. I read that only 0.6% of Americans are trans, way less than 1%. So how can hating them or hurting them be anyone's top priority? The answer to that is political. It's about how to manipulate your base. Smart people are in the minority. You needn't worry about them because among the electorate, stupidity reigns supreme. So keep your people ignorant and afraid. Keep them voting based on fear of the unfamiliar, fear of other people. Be afraid of those people who are different from us, who maybe don't believe exactly whatever we believe, people who look different, dress different, people who act different, especially in bed. Not that that should concern you, but make your voters think that even showing common courtesy to these people on the street is as bad as sleeping with them. Don't let your constituents think or even know about some of the real issues, things that they should care about, things you actually could make better for everyone. Now, you're not there for everyone. You're only interested in what makes things better for you and at everyone else's expense. So you have to play to their prejudice to convince your constituents that imposing draconian restrictions against other people, strange and scary people, is somehow morally justified in the eyes of an imaginary ultimate authority that you pretend is backing you up. So that your base feels as if punching down on the weak is somehow righteous rather than pointlessly stupid and cruel. As if we're defending ourselves, our women and children, from weirdos in the restroom. Never mind that throughout American history, more Republican politicians have reportedly been arrested for sexual misconduct in public restrooms than trans people have. Never mind that an alarming percentage of the clergy, so-called men of God, of every religion, have been molesting children since the beginning of faith-based beliefs, and God never does anything to stop it. Now, let's not bother the rich and politically powerful. Let's not hold them accountable for what they're actually doing. Let's instead blame everything on a pitiful few who can't even fight back. In this discussion that I had on Facebook, this one ignorant bigot demanded, just like Senator Bob Hall did, that anyone going into a public restroom may be profiled based on appearance and ID'd if they are considered suspect. So that if you're not going to the right bathroom based on your birth certificate, then you're going to jail instead. Think about how well that would play out when your slightly effeminate-looking teenage nephew gets carded on the way into the men's room. Or better, when your middle-aged great-aunt with her slight mustache gets carded trying to get into the ladies' room. Never mind that you're not only embarrassing her, but also holding her up when she has to pee. The issue for this particular bigot on Facebook was his idea that the rights of cisgendered men and women should override the rights of trans people trying to enter their restrooms. And think about what that means. He is saying that if you're in your restroom and someone comes in who you think shouldn't be there, then he says that your right should override their right to relieve themselves. Based on what? He kept asking whether cisgendered women had the right to throw out a trans woman out of the ladies' room. Do they? I think that depends. Is the trans woman using those facilities the way they're supposed to? Or are they doing something else that is intrusive, unethical, or maybe even criminal? Is there some offense beyond the fact that trans people merely exist in that space? Where else are they supposed to go? The one example this guy had was someone who lived as a man but liked to dress up as a woman to inspect their restrooms. Couldn't that person be weeded out by what their ID says? It could be, if these people would allow sensible solutions, but they won't. Instead, they insist that it has to be based on your birth certificate, not your ID, because IDs can be corrected by mature adults, and they don't want us to have the right to do that. And maybe my problem is that I'm too well-traveled. I was in the men's room of, I think it was the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands, and there were many men at the urinals, and I saw 2 women there too, working as janitors. Nobody got raped. So there's men peeing everywhere, women standing right there joking with each other and talking about the day, whatever. It's all good. Nobody cares. But okay, that's Amsterdam, right? Okay. One night in a French restaurant, I go downstairs to see a long counter with a sink and a mirror. The ladies' room on that side, men's room on this side, urinal in the middle. But to get to the ladies' room, women would have to come down the stairs and then walk past the urinal to get to the ladies' room, because the urinal is in the same room as the sink and the mirror that the men and women have to share. So when a lady washes her hands in the mirror, she can see the reflection of the back of a guy taking a piss behind her. The only way to have privacy in this lavatory was if you needed to sit on the commode in its own little room. And in Europe, the room is called the toilet, not the thing you sit on. Okay, but that's Paris, right? They do things different over there. What difference does it make? If you're a lady in an American ladies' room and this girl comes in, do you have the right or a reason to kick her out? Because if we impose laws based on birth certificates, then she'll have to use the men's room. How well do you think that would work out? Are we only concerned with the safety of the people in the ladies' room and not so much the safety of someone like this in the men's room? What if you're in the ladies' room and this guy comes in? Do you have the right to throw him out? Well, no, you don't, because his birth certificate says he was initially declared female. So this is the restroom these bigots would force him to use, no matter how uncomfortable some women might feel about that. If you impose a law forcing people to use the restroom indicated on their birth certificate, then you are requiring that this man follow your daughter into the toilet. What happens then? Well, this guy can tell you he wanted to use the men's room, but because his birth certificate identified him incorrectly, he was forced to use the ladies' room instead, whereupon he was arrested for being a man in the ladies' room. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Maybe the problem is that not everyone has completed their transition, and some people whose minds can only think in binary have issues trying to see someone who isn't binary. So what if this person walks into the restroom? Would the men or the women have a right to throw them out of whichever restroom? Which restroom should they use? And tell me whether this person is using a subjective identity, and which restroom should they be in? Because it's not like there's one for men, one for women, and a third option, like one for everyone. They're not going to do that for something that represents less than 1% of the population. And nearly all of them simply want to be accepted as one or the other. The guy I was talking to on Facebook accused me of arguing from emotion, which I wasn't, and he was. But he said he knows he's the logical one because he explained our discussion and got agreement, which of course he did. I just explained our discussion to you and got much agreement from many of you from my side of the story, because that's the only side you have yet heard. Though I will include the link below so that you can see both sides and decide on your own that I'm right, because he didn't get agreement from people. He got his assurance from ChatGPT. So my thought is this. If you want to travel, you need a driver's license, a ticket to ride, a passport, maybe even a visa. Then you're allowed to do what was prohibited before. If you have maybe not completed, but at least begun your commitment to a years-long process of transitioning, you tend to make those changes on your idea as well. That, I think, who you are now, regardless of what some doctor thought decades ago, should legally entitle you to the restroom appropriate for that choice. But of course it's not that simple, is it? Not when conservative political officials want lists of everyone who changed their gender on their state ID. They don't want to solve a problem, they want to create one. Because this was never about the safety of women and children. It certainly ain't about freedom or liberty. This always was about hatred, oppression, and forced conformity.